So Tony and Sue were at my house, and I was telling them a story about a bottle of wine that was on my wall. And they said, that's really good. You should tell everybody on the Zoom call. And I mentioned it, and then Suzanne said a couple people had asked, they thought it was like a story that I was relating. It's like, no, it's my real life. So I wrote up something, and I sent it out, and I'm going to share it with you. Diane said I should share it. So this is a true event that happened in my life, but it now holds greater relevance and significance. It's called The Wine Story. Several years ago, my husband and I were traveling in the Finger Lakes region and visiting local wineries. The Finger Lakes are known for their ideal soil, great growing conditions, and delicious wines. We were sampling a Cabernet Franc. The gentleman showcasing this particular wine gave us a sample from one year that was a particularly dry year. We also tried the same wine, same grape variety, but from the following year, which had an abundance of rain. He asked us which we liked better. We both said the wine from the dry year. He explained that during the hot, dry season, the grapes on the vine had to work harder to produce more juice and sweetness. Because the grapes worked harder, there were more nuanced and levels of flavor in that wine. We felt it was far superior to the other wine where the grapes did not have to work so hard. Here is the analogy to our petitioning process. Petition! As we struggled in difficult conditions with more no's than yeses, sometimes it actually feels like a drought. Working in terrible weather conditions, hot, dry, and intense sun with no shade on black asphalt for hours at a time, we persevere. And as we persevere, the fruits of our labor are not only sweetened, but strengthened. The victory is greater and has more levels of success and numerous nuances that now define our character and our integrity. And as Diane said, now we have wine to drink. So, have a glass in your hand. Here's a toast to the hot, dry, difficult growing season, which is the 6+ weeks of petitioning, and on to the sweet success of harvest with the victory of Diane and Jose being put on the ballot, achieving the near impossible. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Jose. To all of you, thank you guys for everything that you did. Thank you.
While Dennis is preparing, I just wanted to say here's to the Maestra of Buffalo, because we counted on those 300, 400, 500 signatures every single day, day in, day out.
I'll go there.
Okay.
No introduction is necessary. Or desired. I really don't know how to actually sum up 6 weeks of petitioning. 2 years ago I did this, I was in your position, where I was responsible for getting tons of signatures every day. And I think I've gained a deeper appreciation for what it means to deploy somebody to be out in the street, being faced with no's every day, especially in the Bronx. I mean, I don't know how, but Robert Castle experienced racism in the Bronx. I experienced racism in the Bronx. We had like 1,000 no's in the Bronx for a yes or 10-minute conversations with somebody who's like really asking about us, and then they say, yeah, I'll think about it later. And to put other people through that and then see them that they're driven by something greater than any one of us. This isn't about Jose Vega. This is not about Diane Sare. Everybody in this room and everybody who came out to petition and petition for my campaign and Diane's campaign understands the situation of the world. Everybody got the red alert from Helga that, the radar system, that the Russian radar system to detect nuclear bombs was, recently attacked, and, everybody here is actively trying to prevent World War III, and that's not just true of people in this room, that's true of people around the world who look at Diane's campaign and my campaign as a vehicle to get behind for peace. And I want to make that very clear to everyone in this room. This is not a vanity campaign for either of us. This is a peace movement. And I believe it is the only viable peace movement in the country. I want to give a special thanks to the people who came out for that first weekend, who flew from around the country. People who came from Ohio, people who came from Missouri, people who came from all kinds of places, people who took weeks off work to petition for me. I want to thank the people who put me up on their shows to announce the fact that we were petitioning. I want to thank Andrew Comley by name, because he was the superstar volunteer who took weeks off work, came from New Jersey, and there was a particular day where it was really cold, and that's the thing about April, it can be really cold one day and then really hot the next. It was a really cold day, we were struggling for signatures, and he just said, yeah, I'm gonna go, I'm not really well prepared for this weather. And so Adrian, who was a squad leader, just assumed he was gonna leave, and then Andrew came back a couple hours later, said, I'm on my way, came back with like a bag of clothes for people, jackets, gloves, leggings, pajamas for people to wear so that they could keep petitioning in the cold, because people were clearly underdressed and unprepared. And when you talk to Andrew about it, he's like, yeah, it's no big deal, there's people cold, But because to him, that's just what you're supposed to do. That's just what you do. People are cold, I'm gonna go all the way back to New Jersey, all the way back to the Bronx, because people are cold and we gotta get signatures. And he really didn't think it was a big deal, he just did it. And that astonished me so much that somebody would just do that, go out of their way, taking off work, just to make sure people can actually do this thing. I wanna thank, of course, Kynan, being out there every day, and also going to school full-time. Adrian. Adrian Pearl, my treasurer, we couldn't have done this without him.
I'm paying the bill right now.
I, of course, want to thank Robert Castle, who put up with me for the last 6 weeks. Who has seen the best and the absolute worst of me up close. So, it's really a special kudos to him. I, of course, want to thank Lynn Speed. None of this would have been possible without Lynn Speed bugging us. And there are countless other people I could name. I could be here all day naming people. And I just want to express my gratitude to every single person who came out to petition for myself and Diane. I truly think we can make some magic happen in November. And I'm really excited to see where we go now, because the same energy that we put into petitioning is the same energy we're going to put when we're door knocking, when we're doing events, when we're tabling, when we're organizing, constantly reacting, and also actively taking measures against what's happening around the world. No, we are the force that people are going to look to and will respond to, okay, as a response to the threat that's going on. Because we're not just anti-war, we are pro-peace, okay? It's not the same thing. We actually have a solution for lasting peace, not just a temporary peace. And I think everyone we talk to, everybody who signed, knows that, because all of you give that every time. So on behalf of myself, my campaign staff, I want to thank all of you. So thank you all.
All right, who's next?
Since you're there, since you're standing there,
Okay, hold on.
you may as well introduce the next speaker.
Dennis Speed.
Oh, do you want an introduction?
Does he need one?
This is a test.
Okay, this next person, you might have heard her name. She's a 50-year-long associate, 50 plus, right?
60-year associate.
Sorry, 70-plus year associate.
39.
Lyndon LaRouche. She is a U.S. Senate candidate running against Kirsten Gillibrand. 2 years ago, she ran against Chuck Schumer. She started a chorus in 2014, right? Schiller Institute Community Chorus. And that was in response to the killing of Eric Garner. This was a man who was choked out by the police. And there was a massive outcry against his death. And Diane's response to the violence was to create something beautiful, was to respond to it with beauty, with choral music, with a chorus. Because people don't know this, but the opposite of violence is not violence, right? Non-violence is not inaction, it's creativity. The opposite of destruction is creation. And that's what Diane did with her chorus, and that's what she's doing with this campaign. So Diane.
Thank you. Well, I first want to thank everybody who was involved in the petitioning. There are many things I could say about each one of you. People did heroic work. Heroic. This campaign was much harder than 2 years ago, in my opinion, because of the psychotic presidential election. And I am speaking in understated terms. I don't think in the history of our republic have we had a greater crisis with a less qualified group of candidates. And that is extremely alarming and disconcerting, and you see it in the population because nobody was happy. People are high anxiety and also delusional. All of us met that 1 in 100 fanatical Biden supporter. Who are you supporting for president? And then you'd say, well, I think they're not qualified. Well, do you think Donald Trump could get elected? And you'd say, well, you know, I think Biden's gonna, you have no idea. Biden is so underrated. Look at the economy. They're stepping over homeless people who are drug addicted. The economy is fabulous. We're gonna have nuclear war. We're actually about to have nuclear war. We're gonna have nuclear, I mean, it was psychotic. And the Trump supporters slightly less so, but they wanted to make sure that I wasn't supporting Biden, which was not hard, I'm definitely not. So, but this kind of, as if the election was going to be fair, and as if the President of the United States, unless it were an extraordinary statesman like Lyndon LaRouche or Abraham Lincoln or FDR or John F. Kennedy, unless it were an extraordinary person, in some ways the actual president doesn't matter. It should matter. The reason why they did the coup in the 60s and assassinated Kennedy is because the President of the United States has enormous power. But since the American people decided to allow the Warren Commission cover-up and never got to the bottom of who killed Kennedy, guess what? That's who's been running the country ever since. So we have been blessed or cursed with a situation where anyone who is qualified to be president is not allowed to get anywhere near that office. And that is why I decided to run for US Senate from New York, first against Schumer and now, because I figured that was the closest I could get to a presidential campaign in a domain where we had some control, and people know what happened last time. We got the 66,000 signatures, we got on the ballot, they refused to allow me in the debates, and then they stole my vote on television. And we got to watch my vote go from 57,000, which was already a fraud the night of the election, down to 29,000 the next day, down to 25,000 by the end of the week, and it's probably down to minus 15 if we look now. So, as Jose said, it does have to be a movement. Now, before I get too far, I do have to thank a couple people particularly, one of whom is Suzanne Klebe. Suzanne. Okay. Right. So, very much. And the other person is my husband, Chris. Who made a point to set a record of petitioning every single day from beginning to end, not one day in which he did not petition. And besides that, took all of my phone calls and dealt with everything.
And he never got less than 100 a day. I hated it.
That's not true.
I'm
No,
just
that's
kidding.
not
No, there was one day I lost my voice, I only got 50.
So now back to where we are. Why is this so important? Why did we do this? And I want to say a couple things about the process. I don't intend to ever do this again. We have to change the law. This is fascist crap. What people go through, and you see how bureaucracy is the aid of fascism, because nobody really can do this. And although the Kennedy campaign turned in a lot of signatures, they paid a lot of money to people to do it. We are the only campaign that I'm aware of that turned in the number of signatures that we turned in, and I will just say, no, I won't. Let's make the assholes count our petitions. If they want to know how many we turned in, I'll just say it's well over 45,000. But we're the only people who did this, and did it with the competence and the love and the commitment, because the people in this room know what is at stake and why we have to have a voice. And I will just say that there are we are in a moment of incredible transition. The transatlantic British imperial liberal system is bankrupt, dead, and dying. And because they are weak, that's why they need a dictatorship. That's why they need censorship. That's why they need bureaucracy, which the Board of Elections at Albany is just like Joe Biden's rules-based order, which is they make up the rules, they don't have to explain them to you, and they can change the interpretation whenever they want, and then use that to torture you in various ways. So I don't think the signature requirement in the state even should be 15,000 signatures. I think that people should have access to the ballot, and they should demonstrate they exist by getting a certain number of signatures in half of the counties, maybe 50, maybe 100, something like that. And there should be a standard across the nation. Most people, and we ran into it, you found the voters did not know why they have two vomitacious choices when they go to vote. They don't know why that is, because no one else is allowed on the ballot. Because the most qualified people are not allowed on the ballot, and what you're allowed to vote for is a prostitute who is willing to sell their policy to the highest bidder for the purpose of upholding some party line, which is going to lead to the end of civilization. So, this transatlantic system is dead. There is a new system coming into existence which absolutely took its origin from the work of Lyndon LaRouche in the 70s his commitment to an international development bank, his and Helga's meetings with Indira Gandhi, Lopez Portillo, friends in the non-aligned movement, calls for a debt moratorium. The Russian economist Sergei Glaziev said that every nation that is moving as part of this was influenced by Lyndon LaRouche, and that is true. They represent over half of the world's population, over half of the world's raw materials. That's billions of people, and the only way you're going to stop them is with a nuclear war. You cannot stop 4.5, 5, 6 billion people who have decided to embark on a different policy. And we have people now who are insane enough to risk it, and they also want to make us complicit in their crimes. For example, with the ongoing offensive in Rafah, which is hideous, and the videos of the war crimes being carried out by the IDF, funded by American dollars, are available for everyone to see. And in the United States, we have exactly what you had in Nazi Germany, which is that if you stand against genocide, you are labeled as a terrorist. And we have a Congress where people are proposing that students who are standing, Margaret Sheldon's phone. So people who are protesting the genocide, rightly, you have congressmen like this Senator Marsha Blackburn saying that they should be put on a no-fly list because they're terrorists. So everything is opposite. IDF soldiers who are committing atrocities are supposed to be getting veterans benefits in the United States. Whereas in South Africa, the foreign minister, Naledi Pandor, announced that any South African who is a dual citizenship and participates in genocide against the people of Gaza will be arrested when they return to South Africa. So think of the difference there. I will say on that we also have a problem, as we had with the anti-Vietnam War movement in the United States, which was infiltrated by the Congress for Cultural Freedom, a project of the CIA, the Tavistock Institute, serving to make people impotent, turning it into the rock, drug, sex, green counterculture to destroy what Martin Luther King embodied, which is a true understanding of the constitutional values of our republic. And we see that in some of these protests, unfortunately, where people don't understand that the United States was created in opposition to the British Empire. They have conflated every kind of peculiar perversion with freedom for the Palestinian people, and it's problematic. So we have to be very clear. The proposal that LaRouche put forward, the OASIS plan, a two-state solution standing on international law, which is UN Resolution 242, that may not be the final place where you end up, but it's the last thing that exists, and it requires the recognition of a Palestinian state. And Biden cannot run around saying that he's supporting a two-state solution when he will not recognize the legitimacy of a state of Palestine, which will then has to be on equal footing to negotiate how this ends. But most importantly, you have to have development. You have to green the desert. And people have to stand strong in the United States, and it's not enough to be against. You have to have an image of where we're going. Now finally, the Russia situation, and I just wanted to share with you, because as people may know, Jose referenced it, the supposed quote-unquote Ukrainians, we use that term advisedly because everyone knows that Ukraine doesn't do anything without instruction from the MI6 and the US State Department, struck the Armavir early radar, early warning system far into Russia. We also know that yesterday the NATO parliament, whatever that is, had a vote where they agreed in large majority that Ukraine may use the weapons it is sent to shoot as far into Russia as they want, and they can strike any targets that they want in Russia. Now, Russia has been very clear. Unlike the United States, they have a clear doctrine about when they will use nuclear weapons, when they are under existential threat. And in their section on nuclear weapons, section 3, conditions for transition of the Russian Federation for use of nuclear weapons, number 19C says, attack by an adversary against critical governmental or military sites of the Russian Federation, disruption of which would undermine nuclear forces' response actions. So if you destroy a facility that would allow Russia to respond to a nuclear strike, you are crossing the line to the threshold of where they would use a nuclear, where they have announced that a nuclear response is justified. That is why we are saying that we are very close to a nuclear war. That is not for hype. That is not so everyone can be scared, although you should be scared. It is because it is true. And we have people in Washington, D.C. right now who are so arrogant and so deluded that they believe that they can go ahead and cross all these lines and that Putin is only bluffing, and that Putin, who is beloved by his population, as we saw in the recent Russian elections, is going to be prepared to stand by and allow his nation to be destroyed. And that is not going to happen. So we have to break out in the United States these campaigns. And the last thing I wanted to say is what we did on the petitioning was very effective. Like these pompous egomaniacs, when they design something that is to torture or harm someone else, like the sanctions on Russia, that completely backfired. Russia is very strong, and we are going down the drain. When the Board of Elections decided that Diane Sare had to get 45,000 valid signatures to get on the ballot, the Sare campaign spoke to 300,000 New York voters, got out hundreds of thousands of pieces of literature, and put the campaign on the map, so to speak. Between us, after a few deployments in Manhattan, and we're going to do a lot in Manhattan, we had done a few days of petitioning in Manhattan, which I was involved in personally, and guess who calls my cell phone? Luckily, I was at a bar, so I couldn't hear them, and I get a text message. Oh, Diane, it's so-and-so from the New York Post. Would you give us a call? So I told Suzanne that I have no intention of talking to them. Would you call up and see what they want? And their cover story was, we want to know if Diane is going to the Democratic Convention. And Suzanne said, why would Diane be going to the Democratic Convention? She's not a Democrat. And they said, well, you know, we saw that she spent $1,000 to go to the Radio City Music Hall event and disrupt the presidents. And if she cares so much about disrupting the presidents, we thought she might be going. Now, when is the Democratic Party convention? August. Do you think the New York Post was really calling to find out whether I was going to disrupt the and do they think they are so, I mean, they could be so stupid, but do they really think that I would tell them if I were planning to go? Oh, gee, you guys are a bunch of disgusting scumbags, but I'd love to let you know what I'm doing in the next few weeks so you can sabotage me. No. But I'm telling you, it is so on the radar screen. No one here should underestimate in any way what we are doing. How many people here observed or were told of people who were videotaping our petitioning deployments? Okay, and if you didn't know, maybe, I don't know, but people were videotaping. Become more alert. People were video. How many people know about the Democratic Party official who loves us so much he signed our petition 7 times?
Oh, yeah.
making a point to go to different, 8 times, okay, to go to a different witness every single time. Okay, thinking.
Who's that?
We'll discuss it later, but it'll be revealed. No, so we know that we are hurting them, but our intention, as a friend said once, was not to worship Satan, but to kill Satan. Our intent is to destroy this apparatus. So coming out of here, we are going to be doing banner deployments, street deployments, field deployments. I have in that box my plan, America's Next 50 Years. We have to have the image of what the United States will do when it joins the Belt and Road, when we come back to our revolutionary identity. And we spend lots of money on researching fusion energy, and we build finally the high-speed rail corridor through the state of New York, and Jose Vega leads a renaissance in the Bronx to recruit thousands of young people to work on the space program. And to really rub it in, I want to campaign all up and down Broadway in Manhattan for the Oasis plan. So please take a breath, eat, and then get ready. That's right, gird your loins for the next phase of the campaigns, in which we actually have to win. Whether we control what happens with the election or not, we have to win the policy, because if we don't, none of us may be here to commemorate Memorial Day in the future. Thank you.
We're drawing to the conclusion that a few things should be said. Gerry Rose. You're there. Okay, great. So maybe you would say a few things. Would you like to say a few things? We want to demand that you get up here, Gerry. You're old.
Oh, yeah.
Gerry.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, good. Well, there are a number of what I would call old war horses in this room. And people who know what a war horse is. We were with the original LaRouche group, the first generation. After the first generation. What?
I said I wasn't in that.
You were not in that.
You're just a baby.
But I was. And through many permutations, many people fell away because they couldn't stand alone. They had to have so-called more powerful forces. You know, Trump, some went with Trump, some went with Kennedy. Before that, others just went for money, you know, and you know, lifestyle or whatever. So the generation that stayed with Lynn is indestructible, in fact, and has been tested over a 45 to 50 year period. Our enemies know who we are, we know who they are. And what we have in this room today, which makes me so happy, is 3 generations. And I have to say, and I have to give great praise to Helga Zepp-LaRouche, because after Lynn passed away, a number of people got very frightened. And Helga, you talk about, I mean, don't say I said this, but she's the ultimate war horse. Anyway.
She's fond of horses.
Yeah, but she likes horses, but anyway, if anybody says that, I'll deny it. But anyway, but the thing about a war horse is when battle is called to, their ears perk up, their senses increase, and their capabilities increase. And what she did, and Jose and Dennis and certainly Diane and others know, we had a whole group that just wanted to beg Trump to save them. We had another group that left that wanted to beg Kennedy to save them. And Helga, after Lynn died, in fact, 2 days later, she was in Morristown. And she led this movement in a totally independent direction. We don't curve fit the truth. You know, which was courageous beyond belief at the time. And those who wanted to curve fit the truth, they left. Those who thought they needed anything but the most powerful ideas in history left. But what we have now is a core of people and a new generation coming forward that in fact, around the most profound ideas in human history, can reorganize this planet. And I am very proud of the 3 generations in this room that have proved themselves in heavy combat over the last 6 weeks. Many have been through other campaigns, many this is their first or second. Let's just say our enemy knows who we are, and they fear it, and we know who they are, and we laugh at them, so.
Art Murphy. Yeah.
Art Murphy.
Art Murphy has an offering.
Yep.
Hi.
Yeah.
This is just a composition I together, which I hope comes across. It's in the sonnet form. So I titled this Hidden Voices. Do forces astrophysical oft-times seem prophecies of earthly revolutions? Do we defeat all oligarchic crimes while we but wait harmonious conjunctions? What lawful force is there that shall eclipse the darkness with the bold, clear light of truth? A long-sought word goes out from hope-filled lips. A choice for ballot in the election booth. Our champion, Diane, has independence to blast the wicked Wall Street denizen as we petition for redress of grievance for chains of long abuse. Our citizen, whose hidden voice, in volumes tightly bound, becomes the trumpet. May freedom's song resound.
Anyone have? Suzanne?
Come on, Suzanne. Oh no, Suzanne.
I just want to add one thing. Everybody here, as we know, did a phenomenal job, everybody. But the thing I wanted to add was that we had 203 people petition just for Sare. And that doesn't even count
Witness.
the people, witness. 203 people witnessed for Sare. We have more with whatever Jose had that we didn't have. Now just think about that. That's the American population, which is ultimately how we win the fight. We're a country formed by a revolution based on the idea of self-government. And people have become betrayed, and they know it, and they're upset about it, but they become passive or resentful, or they stick to themselves. I always realized that with the attacks on LaRouche were always an attack on the people. It wasn't just LaRouche, because LaRouche would say, let's build the Bering Straits Tunnel, or let's go to Mars. Oh, that's a great idea. Then he would get attacked, or we couldn't, get on the ballot, we were losing, the people would get depressed. The attack was always on the people and the potential of the American population to actually fulfill the ideas of the revolution, which are in the culture. It's just there. Including places like Queens where 161 languages are spoken, that people choose to come to the United States and be part of this revolutionary tradition, no matter how beaten down it is. And I think that what you see around having 203 people, and I didn't even know the names of some of these people when we were going down the list. Who are these people, up there sending in petitions? I have two short stories which kind of indicative. One is, one woman called in from Long Island, and she said to me, "What is this that I signed?" I want you to tell me. And then she said, "And why did I sign it?" I never signed petitions. Somebody on a parking lot. Okay, he said he was her husband. But
Could have been anybody.
Do you have a picture? Can you prove he was her husband? I don't trust anybody. I tell my husband, "Why did I sign?" And then, we talked about it. And she said, "I did research her when I got home, and I do agree with a lot of the things she's saying, but why did I do it?" And, you had this thing that people did it, and there were other calls like that, which were really funny. I mean, why am I getting involved? One woman, she got the petition, solo petition. I called her, "Can we pick it up?" I got 4 signatures, and my friend told me I was wasting my time, so I just dropped it. And I said, "Well, bring your 4 signatures over to the shopping center." So she said she would, and she didn't. So I figured that's it, didn't do anything. Then I get this text, "How do I get you my signatures?" I said, "Well, you missed the deadline. Can I fax them?" It's really interesting because people want to change the country, and somehow they got it that this is a vehicle for them and that they can have an impact. And that's what we have to develop, because really that's the potential of the United States. And the campaigns can accomplish that. And again, the optimism that LaRouche's program always represented of what the country could be and what they could be and their children could be, and what it means to have a real peace. This is something worth fighting for, but people, they don't think you can win anymore. They're real cynical, they're depressed. Now, I think one thing that would be really interesting is that for people who petition to actually write up some of the things that happened out there, the people you met, we got really interesting reports. Marcel was telling me the difference between people in Binghamton versus the people he talked to in Rochester, and the impact of when IBM left and took 40,000 jobs, and people lost their pensions and lost their health care, and had this idea they were betrayed by the government, but still, had this idea of somehow participating. I think that we have such a tremendous potential around what people did, and that includes the people in this room who did extraordinary things, in terms of hours and pressure, and still did it. And that also showed people, the average person who watched you, who didn't sign, the guy who went out and saw you out there and didn't sign, it really had an impact. And I think that's going to be something to really build on in terms of making this revolution stick and actually expand it, so that we're not in this situation, but we actually achieve this idea of what the American Revolution and what we've proposed around the One Road, One Belt, this concept of a peace through development perspective can actually represent.
Two years ago, I was at a gas station. And, I had the pleasure of running into Susan. I had a shirt on with Dump the Swamp. And I'm a combat officer from Vietnam. I served the 3rd Marines, 3rd Battalion, football company. the Commander 2 Rifle Brigades, and all of you in here are honorary Marines, because you're fighting for the greatest gift that we have, our democracy and our freedom. Joe Biden is thoroughly full of shit with democracy. Everything that comes out of their mouths are lies. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of all the stupidity. We had great leaders in this country. We had Dr. King, we had John F. Kennedy, and we had Malcolm X. Those were great people. We have shitheads now, and we have a person right here who I got the most respect in the world for, because I've been around the street. I'm a tough kid from Red Oak in Brooklyn, 22 years on the NYPD, and I learned respect and dignity. You are my brothers and my sisters. I have the most respect in the world here. God bless you. And in the next 6 months, let's get this woman in. I know we gotta go.
I have something to say in response to that, but if you have anything else, go for it. See, no, that's why I had always wanted to live in New York City. That is living expression of why. At the age of 5, when I first came to New York City, I always wanted to live in New York City. From a town called Chester, Pennsylvania, which is an industrial town. My father was from there. He moved up there from Birmingham, Alabama, actually Bessemer, Alabama, after having an altercation in his family's grocery store with a white customer. His mother put him on the bus that night. True story, true story. And he was going to Canada, actually. He wanted to get as far north as possible. But he heard that my mother was in Pennsylvania, so he made a detour. He went to Ohio first and then went to Pennsylvania. But he loved the Brooklyn Dodgers. So he brought me to New York in 1957 to go to Ebbets Field, which I was absolutely, completely uninterested in going to. Did not go. And spent the time with my cousins in their, was in the projects, but I didn't know it was the projects. It was just it's a big building with a lot of people in it. And it was a big family. So there were about 9 of them in that house. And then had a couple of kids from across the hall. And the kids were in there, we were all playing, and then one of the kids invited me over to go to their house, and I said, well, where do you live? And he said, across the hall. I said, across the hall? Let's go over. And then there's like 6 people in that place. And I came out, and I looked down the hall, and I saw all these doors on either side of the hall. And I said, I want to live here. Because the idea that all those people could be in that one place all together, that to me was like, that was great. That was great. But what was just said tells you what not just America is about, not just what New York City and New York State is about, but what this campaign is actually about. There's a character to America which people who come to America know about, and people who are in America used to know about. And it's been taken from the United States in the last 40 years, 50 years. And what that character is, the American insistence that everything can always be better than it is. And people can always be better than they are. Now, this has been very much placed under assault by all forms of political correctness and sensitivity, mistraining, and a lot of other things. It's also been completely usurped by, as was said diplomatically a minute ago, shitheads who have, trashed this idea and turned the country into an obscenity, which the people, however, are prepared to respond to. And the way to think about this is, think past all of the particulars of this war or that economic crisis or this march or that riot or this altercation, and then look at the people. And then think about something like 1776 really. I mean, what it must have really been like. Because these are people, they're not from a country, they're from a bunch of colonies. They are, by the way, the most literate population of their type in the world. 90% literacy in the United States. It was 45% literacy in England at the time. And talk all you want about what they came from and whether they were slaveholders, they were this or they were that. Do all that you want. Point of the thing was that what they understood they had to do was to combine forces, and in a situation in which they all had all sorts of disagreements, all sorts of views, and all sorts of actual pressures, to decide that they would commit treason against the crown on behalf of maintaining loyalty and integrity to the human race, to themselves, to the idea that because they believed that the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were inalienable, they couldn't be taken away from people because you couldn't give them to them. No one had the right to give them those rights. Those came from God. They were born with those. They were not all equal in the sense that every person was like every other person, or men were women or something like that. They knew better than that. They didn't mean that by equality. What they meant was something completely different. And this notion was treasonous. It was because it was a divine right of kings. What kings said was right. Kings and queens and oligarchs, whatever they said was what was right. These people said no to that. We live in a time now where precisely that commitment is the one that we have to rekindle. If you go to a few miles from here, just 10 minutes from here, you'll go to Philip Schuyler's house. Philip Schuyler, who is the father-in-law of Alexander Hamilton. And you'll see part of the estate is there, but if you look at the neighborhood around the estate, it's just like going to Gouverneur Morris's house down in the South Bronx. Gouverneur Morris was the author of the preamble to the Constitution. You know, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, you know, establish justice, provide for, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, is to ensure the security. I'm sorry for lessons of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish. But that last part, the ordaining part, what does that even mean? How did the population ordain anything? Isn't ordinance and that supposed to be a religious term? It meant that there was a commitment to this idea of the general welfare, which was sacred and was understood by them to be something that nobody had the right in the United States to abdicate. I mean, that's what Lincoln told the Confederacy. See, Lincoln refused to say that there was a civil war. At one point, he did use that term in the Gettysburg Address, but he always referred to it as the War of the Rebellion, of the Southern Secession. He never conceded that they had any right to leave the United States. He said, there's only one country. It's all of us. It's not a United States R. It's not a bunch of different places. You have no right to leave. So this is the idea that we have thought about, and in the form in which Diane and Jose are now trying to bring this to the American people. Let me just say something about what I think we are able to do. Nobody else has been able to do it. You know, they don't like 30-year-olds like they used to, like Franz Schubert. You know, he died at the age of 31. You know, they don't make 35-year-olds like they used to, like Mozart. He died at the age of 35. You know? But the thing is that we have a few people who aspire to that. We believe we can be better, and therefore we can aspire to that kind of level. And what we're doing in this campaign, and what has happened, and what you've done, specifically, it's not a matter of a compliment, it's a matter of actually recognizing that there's a responsibility you've taken on. You can't now abdicate. We've taken on a responsibility to catalyze this again in our fellow citizens. There are ways that people find themselves sometimes pulled together for a purpose. Nobody knows how it happens, actually. Everybody pretends to know. You know, you give a lot of explanations about why it really happens. You don't really know. We're in a circumstance like that right now in America. What's happening is that people are coming together in different ways, from different backgrounds, from different places. And whether that's 22 years on the NYPD and the fields of Vietnam, or it's coming from, shall we say, highly suspect
FBI-based, radical movements from the 1960s. We're together for a reason. This campaign gives us that reason. But the campaign is not, it is the candidates. We don't want to just say it's not about Diane, it's not about Jose. It is about the two of you. But it's about the two of you as every other American who could be as qualified as any other American. That is what it is about. This is a country of tens of millions of people who are as qualified as one to the other to do what is required this nation needs to do. That's who we really are. That's what America is really about. And that's what we have declared. That's our independent campaign. That is our election campaign. And that is what we want to see replicated all over this country. We intend, by dint of this catalyst, of what Diane did and what Diane and Jose are now doing, to see this done by hundreds of people in the United States over the next 2 years. We're going to incite this process. We're not going to try to control it. We're going to try to unleash it. We're going to try to make it out of control. That's the idea of what we have done here, and that's why, no matter what happens as we go forward from here, this is a victory. What we did today is a victory. What we've done and how we've done this, how we've conducted this is the content of what the actual American Revolution was always intended to do. And we are but an inflection point right now, in turn, as those people were at their time, of that process. That's what you have joined, that's what you have committed to, that's what you have petitioned for, and that's what you have responded to. That can never be taken away from you. It can never be taken away as long as we stand for it from this country. So from that standpoint, we want to thank everybody, obviously, for everything that has been done. So Diane, why don't you give a benediction so we can all go.
Thank you. Well, my proposed benediction is a musical one, which is that we should all rise and sing the national anthem.
Just one verse, right?
One verse.
One verse.
Some of us could show off and sing all three, but we won't.
Keep going, Chris.
Michelle, I'm counting on you to do the note at the end.
Well,
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars